The empire did not arrive with chaos. It arrived with order. Not fire and rage at first, but law, edicts carved in authority, culture rewritten in silence, and a people slowly pressed between survival and identity. This is how revolutions are born. Not in one moment of violence, but in years of pressure that finally demand an answer. This is the Maccabean Revolt. Welcome to Everlight Animations. The land of Judea had once known independence, but now it lived under the shadow of the Seleucid Empire, one of the great Hellenistic powers born after Alexander's world fractured into rival kingdoms.
We must scrutinize these texts, for the pursuit of wisdom begins with doubting what is written.
At first, the change was subtle. Languages shifted, customs blended, new philosophies entered the cities, trade expanded, many adapted, some even welcomed the influence. But then assimilation became enforcement, and enforcement became identity replacement.
How long, O Lord, must we suffer this defilement?
Silence. The Emperor's altar will be finished today.
The pressure intensified. Altars of foreign gods were erected in sacred spaces. Traditions that defined a people were pushed aside. And what began as cultural influence slowly turned into political control over belief itself. For many, it was easier to comply. For others, it was unbearable. Because there are moments in history when survival and identity collide, and one must be chosen.
By order of the Emperor, the practice of the Jewish faith is forbidden. All sacred objects must be surrendered. Defiance will be met with death.
Then came the breaking point. A decree demanding absolute conformity. Worship redirected. Practices forbidden. Symbols of heritage challenged at their root. And for a small group of people in a small village, compliance was not an option. Resistance began not in a capital city, but in Modiin.
Defy the king and you defy Olympus itself. Offer the incense now.
I will not. We will keep the law and the ordinances of our fathers.
An old priest stood before the demands of empire and refused to participate in what he believed was the erasure of truth. His name was Mattathias. And in that moment, something ancient inside history reignited. Not negotiation, not compromise, but defiance. A single act that triggered a chain reaction no empire could fully predict. The rebellion had begun. But this was not a rebellion of chaos. It was disciplined resistance in a world built on overwhelming force. When Mattathias died, leadership passed to his son, a man called Judas. But history would remember him not for his name, but for his approach. Judas Maccabeus, the hammer, not because he was loud, but because he was precise. The Seleucid Empire was vast, professional armies, elite infantry, experienced commanders, war-tested formations influenced by Macedonian military doctrine. On paper, the empire was overwhelming. In reality, it was structured for open field dominance, and that became its blind spot. Because the Maccabees did not fight like a conventional army. They did not stand in formation and wait. They did not meet strength where strength was expected. They moved like terrain itself. Fast, unpredictable, focused.
Push! Again! It's breaking!
Ad arma! Defendite portam!
Small units striking where least defended, then disappearing before retaliation could form. It was not brute force. It was adaptation. While empires relied on predictability, the Maccabees relied on mobility and conviction. They knew every hill, every pass, every narrow route that larger forces struggled to control. And in ancient warfare, knowledge of ground is often more decisive than numbers.
Did you hear?
They struck the garrison at sundown. The rebellion lives.
But this revolt was not only tactical. It was psychological. Because empire depends on the belief that resistance is futile. And once that belief breaks, everything becomes unstable.
To the strong! To Jerusalem! We fight for freedom!
The first victories were not large, but they were meaningful. Small engagements, surprise strikes, captured supplies, retaken positions. Each success carried more weight than its size suggested. Because it proved something critical. The empire could bleed.
The Legion was routed at Beit Horon. The rebellion lives!
They won!
That realization spreads faster than armies. The Seleucid commanders responded with force escalation, larger detachments, stronger patrols, punitive campaigns. But every attempt to crush the rebellion only extended its reach. Because pressure does not always suppress resistance. Sometimes it sharpens it. Then came the battles that defined the movement. Not one climactic war, but a series of confrontations across rugged terrain where discipline, timing, and morale mattered more than scale. The Maccabees fought in conditions many would avoid, and that willingness to fight where others hesitated became their advantage. Over time, something shifted. What began as survival became identity restoration. What began as resistance became purpose, because this was no longer just about territory. It was about memory, about continuity, about whether a people could remain themselves under pressure from a system far larger than them. And that question carries weight far beyond history. Eventually, momentum turned. The empire, stretched across multiple fronts, could not fully contain a force that refused to fight on predictable terms. And one by one, strategic positions changed hands, not because the empire vanished, but because it could not fully control what it could not fully understand. Then came Jerusalem. The city had been under foreign control, its sacred center desecrated, its identity suppressed. And when the Maccabees entered, it was not just a military return. It was a restoration moment.
Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with his commandments and
The temple was reclaimed, the space purified, worship restored according to tradition. And what followed became one of the most enduring symbols in history. Light, returning after suppression. A flame that survived against expectation. Not because darkness never came, but because it could not fully extinguish what was continuously defended. This is why the Maccabean Revolt endures in memory. Not as a simple story of victory, but as a study in resistance under pressure. Because empires do not only collapse from external force, they weaken when they cannot fully erase the identity of those they attempt to absorb. And the Maccabees understood something essential. Some battles are not about winning immediately. They are about refusing disappearance. This story also reflects a deeper pattern seen throughout history. Small forces with clarity can outlast large systems with confusion. Not through superiority of numbers, but through alignment of purpose. And that principle remains relevant far beyond ancient war. Because people, like movements, face pressure from systems, from expectations, from time itself. And in those moments, the question is not always how strong the opposition is, but how clear the identity remains under pressure.
Brothers, for the temple!
To victory!
The Maccabees did not win because the empire was weak. They endured because they were defined. And that definition gave them direction when everything else was unstable. So when you look at this revolt, do not only see rebellion, see endurance, see identity under strain. See what happens when pressure meets conviction that refuses to dissolve. If this cinematic retelling of the Maccabean Revolt moved you, subscribe to Everlight Animations for more historical epics that explore power, resistance, and the forces that shape civilizations. Like this video and share it with someone who needs to remember that even in overwhelming pressure, clarity can still win.